A warm welcome to everybody to this webinar on fundamentals of function points in IT budgeting. I'm your initial host today. My name is Jeppe Hedeå. I'm the CEO of 7N, and I'm also the author of Nucleon, where I claim we can theoretically at least calculate the capacity of a delivery organization, but I'll revert to that in a moment. 7N, who is hosting this webinar together with me, is an agent for super specialists within IT, complex systems development. And we're basically an agent like an actor would have an agent or a sports star would have an agent. We aim for the very, very best and experienced IT specialists, and we serve them by getting the next job basically for them at a relevant project. Just some brief numbers on 7N so that you can fence us in your own perception here. We have a success rate we're very proud of. So only 0.02% of our contracts are terminated prematurely. We have 12 flagship offices with real good agents and good people occupying those, but we also have a virtual international department headed by Helle Førgaard, our vice president in that area, and they serve the rest of the world together with a virtual team. We have 1,450 plus specialists working full time through 7N today, and around 160 clients. So now you can probably put us into your own magic quadrant of where we should be in your area. We have three main streams in 7N. We have advisory that will help our typically cost client managements on performance and how to increase performance and quality in their software development. Then we have the mother load of 7N is the specialist area with all our agents. And then we have managed teams for some of our very large clients. We manage those teams that we deliver out of India and Poland. So let's get into it today. We're talking about IT budgeting. And if that goes wrong, that is really serious for the people who gave the wrong expectations. So what we really want to know is how much will it cost to develop our next project? When will it be finished? We need to be able to deliver professional estimates on that. If we don't, some people will suffer somewhere. So the problem with time and cost in a project is that it derives from two numbers. It derives from a number of the size of the project, so how big is it, and also what is the capacity of our delivery organization. I claim in my book Nucleon that we have not been good enough at estimating the capacity of the organization that should deliver this. And Christine Green, who is the president of IFPUC and who will walk you through how they size projects, also have some tools for estimating the capacity of the organization and therefore being able to deliver this cost and time perspective. But I think we can do better, and I'll get back to you on that as soon as we can travel again. I'll come to the US, where I know many of you come from. But there are two major issues when we cannot give a precise answer to time and cost of a project. One is, of course, that management will stress the development organization unnecessarily. So if they are very optimistic in their expectations and the organization can deliver less than the expectation, it will generate friction in the organization and stress on the people who have to deliver the projects. But also, from a management perspective, all your stakeholders, sister systems, shareholders, business people that expect to have a delivery will be disappointed when you cannot estimate correctly. And that's a huge problem. We've seen many, many scandalous projects where a top management was basically sacked because they disappointed their stakeholders enormously. So we need to be professional in estimation. And today, Christine Green will talk about how to estimate the size of a project, and also a little bit more than that, you promised me. I've known Christine for some 3-4 years since I started writing this book, and in Denmark she is the capacity the capacity, I would say, but we're also a small country, you could say, but the capacity in estimating huge projects. And I'm really proud that you are joining us today, Christina, and I welcome you very much here at the main stage here in our office.
Thank you, Jeppe. Hi, everybody. First of all, I want to say thank you to Jeppe Hedegaard and 7N for inviting me to do this. I hope that by taking you down this road, that I will be able to. Sorry, where is the? There it is. Sorry. That I will be able to give you some insight that can help you make decisions about how you want to bring your IT budget into a more stable perspective than it might be today. So I'm going to talk with you for the next 50 minutes. And I'm going to start by just shortly introducing myself. So my name is Christine Green. As Jeppe Hedegaard said, I'm the IFPOC president currently. And I've been working within the project management process improvement estimating area for the last 20 plus years. I think that one of the things that brought me to the stage that I am today as an estimating expert is the combination of actually being a project manager and also looking at how we could improve the estimating processes, and that's been kind of like my goal for many years. And one of the reasons why I look at this is that I believe that we don't have enough successful projects. In accordance to the Standards report, today we only have about 35% that is considered successful. And that means that it is delivered within that specified expectations that the leadership had on time and budget, but also on bringing value to the business. And that, in my mind, is an issue that we only have 35%. We need more successful projects. For the last decade, we actually had about 19% of our software projects that totally failed. And that means that somebody started a project, somebody used a lot of time on making all the requirements, maybe, establishing the agile team, but they still failed in delivery and never brought the value expected to the business or to the end users of the software. So one of the goals that we want to do on improving the IT budgeting is to remove the ability to fail a software project. And I'm going to be bold enough to say that it will actually bring a return of investment if we do so of at least 1% of the revenue. And that's because, in accordance to Statistica, the likelihood of the revenue, the IT budget revenue for software development is somewhere between 4 and 25%. And in accordance to Gartner worldwide, we have $4 trillion used on IT budgets. So if we can, remove the failed projects immediately, the return of investment for whatever improvement we are making is going to give us at least 1% of the revenue back. Now, the other 46% of all projects is challenge. I'm going to talk a little bit about what is the definition of a challenge project. And then I'm also going to talk about what it takes to actually make a successful project, and kind of like trying to bridge these two things into how function point analysis will be able to support the bridging of not having the issues that challenge project experience, but also bringing in the success factors for successful project that we have seen over the time. Challenge projects, when we talk about the measure today, is not meeting the budget in time and not deliver the value expected to the business. So this is all about, that if we expect, a software application to support our business, and it really doesn't matter whether we are a very large organization that has business applications like artificial intelligence or is a small company that are using ERP or customer relationship applications. If we are expecting this software project to enable us to improve our business, and we allocate a budget, we expect a certain time to market date, and we expect a certain amount of people to be working on this project, then if we don't meet any of these, we have an issue. So in order to create successful projects, we need to accommodate the issues with the challenge, and we need to accommodate the issues of the success factor. And it almost becomes kind of like, in my mind, a combination of art and science. We cannot, just do it by using scientific approach. We still need to have the people factor, the kind of like creativity, the innovativity included in our ability to estimate and control software projects. So I'm going to give you a little bit of analogy on some of my faults, and I'm going to use a little bit of my own history. So when I was a math student, one of the projects that I did was that I worked on simulating of the flow and velocity of anesthesia in the human body. Back then, when we were creating that in the beginning of the 90s, they were still teaching anesthesia doctors by, almost like a learning coaching process. And today they are using simulation as part of the training. They are using data analysis and statistical materials and mathematical model in order to simulate the flow of the anesthesia. It's very seldom that we do that from an IT budgeting perspective within the software industry. And maybe it's time that we start kind of like looking at it from a more scientific approach. My first assignment after graduating was working for a cement factory construction building company, working on a software application, kind of like had the combination of cost estimating what it would take and planning what it would take to actually build a cement factory in a certain spot using the gravel, the surrounding areas material that was available. And then twisting it around, because there's a difference between estimating and planning a project and actually delivering the project. So you need to sometimes think about this as something you do upfront, depending on the quality of your requirements, the level of your requirements, how much you know when you start, but also twisting it around in order to actually deliver it in the right flow with the right velocity and with the right material in place and with the right resources in place. The third analogy I'm going to use is the move of a light tower that we had in Denmark. It was very, very close to falling down into the ocean due to erosion of the coastline. And this was a brand new project. It was, unknown territory. You needed to take a construction that was very old and actually try to move it through sand dunes and move it 70 meters was their goal. And in order to do that, they needed to be very agile, very innovative, but they also need, when they had, all the right specification, were ready to actually do the move, they needed to make sure that the estimate of the move and the planning of the move was done correctly. So they had an iterational part that was the right people in place at the right time. Now, these three analogies is there for the purpose of me kind of like giving you an insight into how I see the process. So the simulation of the flow of the velocity is the analogy of using actually statistical processes, mathematical model, data that are collected over time, and do the estimates and the planning of the software project in a bit more scientific way. At the same time, we need to make sure that when we do the cost estimates and the planning and the execution of the software project, we need to look at it from two angles: the estimating and planning and the actual execution of the project. We cannot forget the need for being agile, the need for being innovative at the right time, at the right spot, in order to make sure that the final kind of like move of the systems, of the applications, or the process that it actually takes, that we're ready to do that without interfering, without destroying anything on our way. So these cases are relevant because we need to make sure that when we treat software project, we need to treat them with the right approach for estimating and planning. We also need to treat them with the right methodology. We need to have the right people in place. So all these kind of like bring together some of the things that I will talk about for the rest of this this presentation. So first I'm going to touch on why do IT projects fail. Then I'm going to talk about what could support the success of software projects. And then I'm going to go into an analogy about function point analysis. And then I'm going to give you an insight on how function point analysis is used within the industries, both government industries and private industries. So in 2002, this book, Quality Software Project Management, came out. And one of the statements that was in this book is that the single most important task of a project is to set realistic expectation. An unrealistic expectation based on inaccurate estimates are the single largest cause of software failure. And I do believe that that's true. Now, estimating is more than just budgets or size. It's kind of like the combination of all the influencing factor that makes the estimates of a project. So realistic estimates is about making sure that we meet the success rate in a higher grade than we have right now, and that we don't fail or don't have challenge project going on. Now, we have done a lot of research over the last 20 years, and we have done a lot of changes over the last 20 years. Unfortunately, some of these changes, we're still kind of like missing the final yard. In 2000 to 2010, it was my perception that we were doing a lot of process improvement, probably too much. And since 2010, we have been started talking about agile, scrum, innovative and iterations and stuff like that. But the numbers still share that from a software project perspective, we are not changing much on the scale of successful, challenge and failed project. And my belief is that introducing proper estimates, using function points and other methodologies on top of function point will help us kind of like change this this trend. So one of the things that is failing, the reasons for failing or challenge project is the lack of control of the scope. In accordance to a PMI study, between 25 and 49% of the actual scope is delivered in projects. So we are failing not only on the estimates, but sometimes even though we keep the estimates, we're failing on delivering the scope that was anticipated. So these numbers kind of like show that we need to focus on, in order to remove the failed and in order to improve the number of successful, to go away from the challenge, we need to focus on the scope. We also need to focus on the way that we estimate both the planned time, so things like resource needs, effort hours, but also schedule, so duration, how long does a project take? We have a lot of failed projects or challenge projects because it takes too long to build. So they either fail because the value that they were supposed to bring is kind of like diminished or removed because it took longer than expected, and challenge because we don't get it, you know, at the time that we expected from a time to market perspective or from a business goal and strategy perspective. And finally, we have challenge or failed projects simply because we just use too much money. It can be a combination of the scope is changing, combination of the resources we have underestimated or been over optimistic, but also because it just simply costs longer to do things like testing, things like closing down a project and making the final acceptance of a project actually being delivered. Now, if we look at it from a expected value and quality, it kind of like the value of a project is probably the combination of the three. And the value thereby becomes, that if you can make sure that we have the right scope, we do it within the right time, that it costs the right amount of money for us to get the return of investment or get the increase of the revenue, that's the value that it's going to bring. And then on top of that, that is, of course, value for the end users. Industries like healthcare industry right now is introducing a lot of really complex software projects where they use a lot of money in order to improve the healthcare, in order to improve the way of diagnosing using AI. And the faster we can get it, the better it is, but we also need to be aware about how much it costs and what value it will bring. If we look at the 35% of all the IT projects that turns out to be a success, one of the analysis is saying that factors of success is about the good sponsor. So the good sponsor is the leadership, the executives. They need to understand the impact of the project. They need to understand the goal of the project, but they also need to not be the delay factor when decisions need to be made. If a project is kind of like changing, because we get wiser during a project life cycle, if a project is changing the scope or it needs, to change the perspective of the planning or the estimates, the good sponsor needs to understand the perspective change and thereby support the project. Then we have the good team, the right people with the right skill set at the right time. We have the good place, which is about methodologies. It's about kind of like the tools that we use. It's about the spirit of how we work, and we need to be lean. We need to be effective and not have too many kind of like rework factors or too many showstoppers along the way. So one of the things that we can do is that we can combine these factors, the scope control, the ability to communicate to the sponsor about the scope, the good team, the ability to estimate and measure the velocity, the productivity of the team, and their ability to work. The good place, having the right resources from a tool perspective, using the right methodology at the right time. And I'm not necessarily an advocate that everything needs to be agile or waterfall or hybrid or whatever. We need to use the right process for the project and not necessarily be caught in this different terminologies. And by the end, we also need to look at the budget and the return of investment and control all of these things, measure them. Having the good sponsor, the good team, and the good place can unlock more value of an IT project. Making accurate estimate of the scope, making accurate control and monitoring of the scope, the budget and the time will enable us to have a successful project. So in my mind, it's a combination of all six. So what is it that we can do with estimating of IT budgets and using function point analysis that will improve and have a look at some of these things? I'm going to talk about the function point analysis to kind of like bring you into what it is about function point analysis that I think can bring some of these missing pieces that we have right now. So function point analysis is a method for measuring or estimating the functionality of a software project. And it is seen by the user perspective, and it is consistent and repeatable, and it is used in things like budgeting, contracts, and stuff like that. But I'm going to talk about that at a slide later on. But first, let me just introduce what function point analysis is about. I'm going to use Lego as the analogy because I want to kind of like share with you a perspective of how I see function point analysis. So we want to figure out how long it takes to build a Lego construction. One of the first things we need to look at, of course, is what type of Lego construction we're dealing with. And the analogy in this one is the simple construction, Lego Duplo, and the Lego technique, which is the complex construction. Function point analysis will be able to support some of the estimates, not necessarily all of the estimates. So it won't, for instance, be able to support the colors of the Duplo that might be very important in the simple construction for the kit, or the engine in the Technique, which is the complex construction in Lego Technique. But function point will for sure be able to size the amount of bricks that is used and also break them into different types of bricks. So the function point analysis will specify the type of bricks, the size of the bricks, and the end result will be kind of like the number of knobs on each of the bricks. When you know something about the amount of bricks, and you don't need to know everything in the beginning, and actually a lot of times we don't know everything, but then you want to make some assumptions that we think, in the wheels will be a special construction, a special brick that we need to create, that we anticipate, for instance, about 100 bricks for the door. We anticipate about 500 bricks for the front of the car. So we can make some of these assumptions early, and then along the way, when we kind of like gradually know more about the project, we can verify these assumptions using function points. Until the end of result, of course, which is the blueprint of the car, we will be able to size the final size before we start building. Even if we decide to kind of like cut the Bugatti into smaller pieces and have one team build the front end and have another team build the back end, that's possible from a size perspective using function point analysis. So when we do the estimates, of course, the expertise that we are using is important. If I ask a 5-year-old boy that is just starting building Lego Duplo to actually create a Lego Technique building, it might take really long time, and it probably will fail in the end because he or she will never be able to actually complete the construction because they're not used to reading the blueprint or not having the innovation to actually start building and then re-engineer the build along the way without ruining the things that are working. Then we got the high expertise, the very skilled resources that will be able to maybe build the construction within a very short time and with very, very few misplaced bricks. This is a way of bridging the size, the number of bricks, into what it takes to actually deliver it. We also need to look at the technology and methodology. There's no doubt about that. Using different methodologies, using different technologies will also change the speed of our build. Now, using Duplo Lego, we might, get a bit of a funny-looking Bugatti, but it might work perfectly fine for the purpose of the audience of the Duplo construction, where the technique will kind of like have another means, and it might be very fast from the perspective of using it in the future because of the time and the amount of brick that went into it. So a lot of people is asking me whether function point analysis is a relevant methodology, and I'm still here 20 years after I started looking at function point analysis. And I actually think that it's not only relevant, it's actually also very current. There are some things in the way that we work that will never change, and one of them is, for instance, Lego. Lego still looks exactly the same as it did when they started building it. The only thing that has changed in Lego is, of course, the audience, the type of construction that we will be using it for. And then sometimes a couple of special bricks is needed, of course. My way of kind of like sharing with you why I believe that function point analysis is still relevant is trying to show you a bit of a showcase. I'm going to start with government usage. Governments are using it within things like request for proposal. A lot of times when governments have request proposal, they are required to not only bring the request for proposal forward to one potential supplier or vendor, but to multiple. So they're actually using it for a vehicle of competitive price evaluation. They are using it for monitoring and control of deliverables, quality assurance management, and scenario evaluation. So scenario evaluation is things like, do we want to, deliver, we have these requirements, do we want to deliver it by building it from scratch or using partly cut packages as part of it, or do we want to, use entire, and what is the price difference on the three scenarios, and what would be the time difference on the three scenarios, and what type of resources would we need? Nationalities like Brazil and Italy have used function point analysis for a long time within their government contract. And there's absolutely no doubt about that, because, of the nature of using it, and they've been used to use it, it's spread outside of government usage and also into the private sector. And they're using it now with a lot of variations. The European Union is another place that are using it. The defense industry is using it, sometimes in different variations, but that's just kind of like how sometimes you need the special brick in your build, and you need to find a way of, making sure that you can accommodate those special items that are required. I'm gonna just give you an example of how government is using it by using the European usage of function point analysis. So their outsourcing strategy, because they use vendors and suppliers, is to address contracting options. And I'm going to use the IFPOC, or are using the IFPOC methodology to reduce the reliance on a single contract, and also to reduce the need for negotiating every time they make an enhancement or an evolution to things that they have already built. One of the examples where they have used it is, for instance, their visa information system, where they used function point for initial value estimation and also re-estimation, and also use it as a part of the price per function point. Now, sometimes what you would do is that you would narrow it down and say, we're going to use it to size the requirement and thereby the scope. We're going to monitor the scope along the way, and the price per function point will only cover the major phases where the most effort is completed, and that is the design and development and testing of the system. And in reality, you could do this regardless of whether you are following a waterfall approach or whether you are following an agile approach, because that will be the majority of the work also within the iterations for an agile design and monitoring and testing. And the minute you go to transition, or the minute you have the early requirement gathering, analysis and management, that might not be the best approach to use function point. Might be other means that you would use. By doing this, it becomes very visible to everybody when the scope is changing, when the scope is evolving, but also visible whether the end result is the scope expected, so that the scope that actually was anticipated is delivered. If we look at the private sector, they of course again use the estimating approach and function point analysis to evaluate, but they also use a lot of times not only kind of like a price per function point, but also mathematical modeling using estimating tools behind it. They use it for supplier evaluation. If they got a lot of different suppliers, they can evaluate the different suppliers up against each other, and they use it, of course, for price negotiation. So let's have a look at an example of how it can be used for supplier evaluation. If you have a large portfolio of applications and projects, and you might have different suppliers that are delivering this, you can analyze the project, you can perform the comparison, you can actually create a dashboard that compare the different suppliers on things like price per function point, ability to deliver within the speed of the delivery, also evaluation of the quality of the product. So how many defects is found before go live, how many defects is found after post go live. So thereby you got an opportunity to compare by industry. I'm gonna give you a little example. This is taking from one of the companies that do these types of comparison, and one of their examples was that by evaluating the different projects based on who deliver it, they almost make this, perfect quadrant, and could see very clearly what type of projects or what type of supplier that needed to improve on any of the parameters that I talked about before. I have heard on presentations at conferences that one of the companies had actually already a year after the investment of doing this type of analysis had cut 32% of their yearly IT budget. So sometimes the return of investment is large if you have, poor quality delivered or poor productivity or poor speed of delivery. If it turns out that your project is delivered, in a really, good fashion, then that's perfect. That gives you an insight into that you have a good quality, good speed of delivery, good productivity, and you've got a competitive price already. So the tools that you use in order to do this is kind of like a combination. You do parametric tools, so that's modeling, mathematical modeling, scenario modeling, Monte Carlo, things like that. And there is a tool market out there that can support you with that. You also do analogies, so historical comparison. And then you do the retrospective benchmark, so what happened in the past, but you can also do the productivity benchmark, so what happens right now and right here. I'm going to give you another example of an organization that are using parametric estimating tool. They're using it both to improve their estimates, but also to do price negotiation and make sure that they are, right on target when they estimate the project, because a lot of the challenge project is challenged because they use more time than they anticipated. And one of the examples is from NATO, which has decided that data-driven estimate is seen as the fundamental part to the success of project deliveries. And one of the cases was a price negotiation from 7.2 million to 4.1. They were using function points, they were using historical benchmark data, and they were using a tool that could present kind of like in a very easy graphical way how to do this. So value and velocity measure, and this is why we go, back to what Jeppe talked about, the Nucleon book. The Nucleon book is a bit like the anesthesia project again, but this time focusing on the team's performance. So a way of trying to bring science into how do we measure the team's ability to deliver, what is a high performance team, and how does a high performance team impact on the delivery. And the initial research that we have tried to do shows almost like a one-to-one. I see this as a brand new way of estimating, and I'm looking forward to see how this evolves with actually measuring the team performance. And I think especially, if you want to make sure that your project right now is delivered, you can look at historical data, but and that will bring one value, one type of input. You can have the experts do the estimates, and that will bring another type of value. And you can measure the team that you decide needs to deliver, and that will bring a third type of value. And when you bring kind of like these three different types of estimating, I think that the likelihood of actually getting a good result is quite high, as long as you still are aware about the projects evolve, scope are changing, requirements are changing along the way. So some of the things that I have not talked about, which is also dear to my heart, is other benefits of function points. For a long time, I've been saying that if you bring in a certified function point specialist into your team, it's probably kind of like one of the most effective way of doing an independent review of your requirements. If a function point analyst is not able to size your requirements, then I can promise you that the likelihood of you actually meeting a time to market date or having any promises of how much it's going to cost or how long it's going to take will not be there. Now you could put in, as I said before, some assumptions, and that could be verified. And if you are doing the agile way, you're basically twisting the triangle around and say, what is the budget and what is the time that we have, and then how many function points, so how much scope can we put into one iteration, into 4 iterations, into 5 iterations of this duration. So that's a twisting of it around. The strengths in my mind is in the consistency. You can do it early, you can do it detailed, you can do it control, and it can evolve and change during the time. So you will be able to measure the changes to the functionality. It's an excellent delivery list. It's an excellent list of whether we have accepted all the requirements, testing list, great input for test cases. So there is a lot of kind of like added value, not only the added value for estimating, but also added value for the process improvement. So how do you start using function point analysis in your organization? First of all, get the right support. You don't necessarily need to, bring function point in and then start using it in all areas of your business or all areas of your software development. So get kind of like a perspective of what is your goals and objective, and then set the strategy. How accurate and consistent do you want it? Where do you want to use it? Make sure that you get training, potentially future certification and some mentoring. There is a, if you want to use it on price modeling or benchmarking or supply evaluation, you need to have it quite consistent, and you don't want to have, the novice to make the estimates or do the function point analysis or guide you through. You might want to have somebody with a bit more experience to it that has tried it before and know what we're talking about. But you can get the return of investment on your first successful project. So it's not like it's a long-term strategy in order to receive the return of investment by introducing this. Recommendation for achieving successful IT projects. One of my kind of like is, we need to treat estimating and forecast with a professional approach. We have a lot of really, really good project managers out there, but asking them to be the expert in estimating, in evaluation of the scope, in planning a project, might kind of like be something that they are asked to do once or twice a year. And we need to make sure that it is experts that go in and support project managers, work with the team, work with the requirements, gathering resources to make sure that the estimate and the forecast are right, or go in and take the temperature on the project if it's iterative development that we're doing. When you do have the size, and you can start kind of like prioritize them, making sure that the project requirements bring value to the end result. You can start controlling your project and your process in a quantifiable way and validate where you are, and thereby get an early warning. So it's not kind of like looking back in the back mirror and saying, oh, that didn't go well. You will actually get an early warning by looking at the scope changing, looking at the time changing, and looking at some of the assumptions that you made. So remember, successful IT budget is all about being realistic and set the expectation right. And having a successful IT budget is a combination of science and art. I believe that using function points, we can improve the success rate of software projects. And I hope that I've given you an insight into why I believe that that's the case. Thank you for listening in. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Thank you, Christine. That was extremely interesting to hear. I certainly had some good takeaways from that. My name is Helle Forgaard, and I am the VP of 7N's International Business Unit. If you have any questions, as Christine said, then please don't hesitate to contact us. And that's it for now. Thank you very much for participating. Take care and stay safe. Bye.
That's goals.